Drug kingpin smuggled heroin in military coffins from Vietnam. March 8, 1971. Madison Square Garden, New York City. The crowd roars as Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier prepare for the fight of the century. But in the audience, one man commands almost as much attention as the fighters themselves. Frank Lucas, a black drug dealer from Harlem, sits ringside wearing a full-length chinchilla fur coat worth over $100,000 in today's money. His wife drips with diamonds. Around them, mobsters and celebrities whisper, "Who is this guy?" In the crowd, a detective named Richie Roberts takes note. That coat, that arrogance, it would be Lucas's undoing. But here's what most people don't know. The most famous part of Frank Lucas's story, the part that made him a legend, never actually happened. True crime fans, this is just the beginning. Like, share, and subscribe to follow every twist and turn in history's most unbelievable cases. Let's begin. Frank Lucas was born on September 9, 1930, in La Grange, North Carolina, a small town where Jim Crow ruled with an iron fist. According to Lucas, the defining moment of his youth came when he witnessed the Ku Klux Klan murder his 12-year-old cousin for allegedly looking at a white woman the wrong way. Whether this actually happened remains unverified. Lucas was known for embellishing his past, but what's certain is that by his early 20s, he'd fled North Carolina for New York City, landing in Harlem in the early 1950s. In Harlem, Lucas fell in with Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson, one of the neighborhood's most powerful black gangsters. Lucas claimed he became Johnson's right-hand man, his protégé, almost like a son. Johnson's widow would later dispute this, saying Lucas greatly exaggerated their relationship. But Lucas undoubtedly learned from watching Johnson operate in a world dominated by the Italian-American mafia. When Bumpy Johnson died of a heart attack in 1968, Lucas saw an opportunity. The heroin trade in Harlem was controlled by the Italian mob, specifically the 5 families who ran New York's organized crime. They had a monopoly, importing heroin through the so-called French Connection, where Turkish opium was refined in Marseille, France, then shipped to the United States. The mob cut the heroin repeatedly, diluting its purity to maximize profits. By the time it reached Harlem streets, the product was weak, sometimes as low as 5% pure. Lucas recognized the problem: too many middlemen. Each one took a cut and diluted the product. What if he could bypass them all? In 1968 or 1969, Frank Lucas traveled to Bangkok, Thailand, a city transformed by the Vietnam War into a major rest and recreation hub for American soldiers. Thailand sat on the doorstep of the Golden Triangle, the opium-producing region spanning Thailand, Laos, and Burma, where warlords and remnants of the Chinese Kuomintang army controlled vast poppy fields. At Jack's American Star Bar, a hangout for black servicemen, Lucas met Leslie Ike Atkinson, a U.S. Army Master Sergeant from Goldsboro, North Carolina. Atkinson was already deeply involved in the heroin trade, having established connections with Thai suppliers and a sophisticated smuggling operation using corrupted military personnel. Here's where the truth gets murky, and where Frank Lucas would later tell his most famous lie. Lucas claimed he made multiple trips to the Golden Triangle, personally negotiating with drug warlords to purchase pure heroin. He said he had carpenters build replicas of military coffins with false bottoms, and that his cousin, Atkinson, would pack heroin inside the coffins of American soldiers killed in Vietnam, shipping them back to the United States where customs agents would never dare search the remains of fallen heroes. It was a story so audacious, so shocking, that it would later become the centerpiece of the 2007 film American Gangster, starring Denzel Washington. Lucas called his method the cadaver connection. But it never happened. Leslie Ike Atkinson, the man Lucas identified as his co-conspirator, adamantly denied the coffin story until his death in 2014. Atkinson stated, "It is a total lie that's fueled by Frank Lucas for personal gain. I never had anything to do with transporting heroin in coffins or cadavers." DEA agents and military investigators who spent years tracking the smuggling operation confirmed that no heroin was ever seized from military coffins. Charles Lutz, a federal narcotics agent who helped dismantle the Asian heroin pipeline, investigated the case extensively and found zero evidence supporting Lucas's claim. The truth. Atkinson smuggled heroin by recruiting soldiers through gambling debts and having them carry drugs in their personal luggage, or by hiding it in hollowed-out furniture shipped through military channels. It was sophisticated, yes, but it didn't involve desecrating the bodies of American war dead. So why did Lucas tell this lie? Several reasons. First, it made him seem more powerful and innovative than he actually was. Second, it played into anti-war sentiments and conspiracy theories popular in the 1970s and beyond. Third, it sold. When journalist Mark Jacobson interviewed Lucas for a 2000 New York Magazine article titled The Return of Superfly, Lucas spun this tale, and Hollywood came calling. But regardless of the method, Lucas did establish a heroin supply line from Southeast Asia. Whether through Atkinson or other contacts, Lucas imported heroin that was dramatically purer than what the mafia sold. He branded it Blue Magic, a street name that referenced its unusual blue tint and remarkable purity, reportedly as high as 98%. While competitors sold heroin cut down to 5 to 10% purity, Lucas's product was so strong it was dangerous. Customers could get the same high with less product, and dealers lined up to buy from him. Lucas recruited a tight-knit organization, primarily relatives and friends from North Carolina whom he believed he could trust. His brothers Huey, Charlie, Shorty, and Larry ran various operations. He employed cutting mills in the South Bronx and Newark where the heroin was processed and packaged. Federal Judge Sterling Johnson, who prosecuted Lucas, called his operation one of the most outrageous international dope smuggling gangs ever. An innovator who got his own connections outside the US and then sold the narcotics himself in the street. By the early 1970s, Lucas's empire was making enormous sums of money. He claimed he made $1 million per day, another likely exaggeration, but prosecutors confirmed he was moving massive quantities of heroin. He purchased property, luxury cars, and lived in a mansion in Teaneck, New Jersey. And he became dangerously arrogant. Detective Richard Ritchie Roberts had already made a name for himself, and not in a good way. Working in the Essex County Prosecutor's Narcotics Bureau in New Jersey, Roberts discovered nearly $1 million in cash in the trunk of a suspected drug dealer's car. In an era when police corruption was rampant, Roberts did the unthinkable. He turned in every penny. His fellow officers ostracized him. They called him names, refused to partner with him. Turning in that money meant Roberts was ratting on the unspoken system where cops supplemented their income with seized drug money. But Roberts's integrity, however unpopular, caught the attention of his superiors. In the early 1970s, Roberts was put in charge of a federal state task force targeting major narcotics traffickers operating between New York and New Jersey. The team began investigating the source of Blue Magic, the incredibly pure heroin flooding Harlem and Newark. Through surveillance, wiretaps, and informants, they slowly built a picture of an organization run by a flashy Harlem dealer who lived across the river in New Jersey. Then came March 8, 1971, the Ali Frazier fight. Frank Lucas, wearing that notorious chinchilla coat, made himself impossible to ignore. While Roberts later said law enforcement already knew about Lucas, the coat became symbolic. Lucas himself admitted, "I left that fight a marked man." He'd broken the cardinal rule of the criminal underworld, never attract attention. The investigation intensified. Roberts's team identified Lucas's family members, tracked his suppliers, and placed informants inside his organization. One breakthrough came when they flipped Lucas's cousin Jimmy Z after he shot his girlfriend. He agreed to wear a wire rather than face conviction. By January 1975, they were ready to move. On January 28, 1975, a joint task force of DEA agents and NYPD detectives raided Frank Lucas's home in Teaneck, New Jersey. Authorities found $584,683 in cash, though Lucas later claimed they stole millions more that they didn't report. His wife, Julie Farrate, was also arrested and later convicted for her role in the operation. Over the following months, authorities arrested Lucas's brothers and dismantled his network. The evidence was overwhelming. In 1976, Frank Lucas was convicted on both federal and state drug trafficking charges and sentenced to 70 years in prison, a combined 40-year federal sentence and 30-year New Jersey state sentence. For most criminals, that would have been the end. But Frank Lucas always had one more card to play. Facing the prospect of dying in prison, Lucas agreed to cooperate with federal prosecutors. And when Frank Lucas talked, he talked about everything. He identified corrupt police officers who'd been on his payroll. He provided information on other drug dealers. His cooperation led to over 52 out of 70 Special Investigations Unit officers being either jailed or indicted. The very detective who'd pursued him, Richie Roberts, convinced Lucas to become an informant. In one of the stranger twists in the story, Roberts later became Lucas's defense attorney after leaving the prosecutor's office. Their adversarial relationship transformed into an unlikely friendship. Roberts even became godfather to Lucas's son. Thanks to his cooperation, Lucas and his family entered the Witness Protection Program. In 1981, his sentences were reduced to time served plus lifetime parole. After spending only about 5 years behind bars, Frank Lucas walked free. But Lucas couldn't stay away from the life. In 1984, he was convicted a second time for attempting to exchange 1 ounce of heroin and $13,000 for 1 kilogram of cocaine. This time there was no deal, no cooperation. He served 7 more years and was released in 1991. By the time he got out, Lucas was in his 60s, his criminal empire long destroyed, his reputation sustained only by the mythology he'd created around him. Self. In 2000, journalist Mark Jacobson tracked down the aging Frank Lucas and wrote The Return of Superfly for New York Magazine. The article painted Lucas as a pioneering black gangster who'd beaten the Italian mafia at their own game, a man who'd smuggled heroin in the coffins of dead soldiers, who'd traveled to the Golden Triangle, who'd made millions. Hollywood bought the rights immediately. In 2007, director Ridley Scott released American Gangster, with Denzel Washington playing a charismatic, almost noble version of Frank Lucas, and Russell Crowe as the incorruptible Richie Roberts. The film was a critical and commercial success, earning over $266 million worldwide. But those who knew the truth were appalled. Sterling Johnson Jr., the federal judge who assisted in Lucas's arrest and trial, described the film as 1% reality and 99% Hollywood, and described the real Lucas as illiterate, vicious, violent, and everything Denzel Washington was not. Even Lucas himself admitted the movie was largely fiction. In interviews, Lucas acknowledged that only a small portion of the film was true, much of it fabricated for narrative effect. DEA agents who'd actually worked the case said the truth percentage was even lower, closer to single digits. Former DEA agents sued Universal Studios, claiming the film defamed them by suggesting 3/4 of New York's narcotics officers were corrupt. Lucas's supplier, Ike Atkinson, spent his final years trying to correct the record, insisting the Coffins story was pure fabrication. But the myth had taken on a life of its own. Frank Lucas died on May 30, 2019, at the age of 88 in New Jersey. He died of natural causes, in relative obscurity, his mythology far outliving his actual criminal influence. His legacy is complicated. On one hand, Lucas was a significant drug trafficker who helped break the Italian mafia's monopoly on the heroin trade in New York. He did import high-purity heroin from Southeast Asia. His operation did contribute to the devastating heroin epidemic that ravaged black communities in the 1970s, destroying countless lives. On the other hand, almost every aspect of his story that made him famous, traveling to the Golden Triangle, the coffin smuggling operation, being Bumpy Johnson's right-hand man, making $1 million per day, was either exaggerated or completely fabricated. The real innovator of the Asian connection was Leslie Ike Atkinson, not Lucas. The real hero who brought down corrupt cops was Richie Roberts, not the dramatized version in the movie. Lucas represents something uniquely American, the ability to rebrand yourself through storytelling, to mythologize your past until the myth becomes more real than reality. He died not as the vicious drug dealer that court records and DEA agents described, but as the legend he'd created, the smooth operator in the chinchilla coat, the man who'd outsmarted everyone. The story of Frank Lucas teaches us something important about how we process crime narratives. We want our criminals to be masterminds, our cops to be heroes, our stories to be clean. We want the drug dealer to have smuggled heroin in soldiers' coffins because it's shocking and memorable, even if it never happened. But the truth is often more complicated and less cinematic. The truth is that Frank Lucas was a talented liar who capitalized on America's fascination with outlaw mythology. The truth is that the heroin he sold, whether it came in coffins or furniture, destroyed families and communities. The truth is that his cooperation with law enforcement, while it exposed corruption, was motivated by self-preservation, not redemption. Perhaps most importantly, the truth is that we're still grappling with the legacy of the drug war, police corruption, and the glamorization of criminal life that stories like Lucas's perpetuate. Frank Lucas wanted to be remembered as the American gangster. Instead, he should be remembered as the American fabulist, a man who understood that in America, the story you tell about yourself can be more powerful than the truth. The real tragedy isn't that Frank Lucas lied about the coffins. It's that we wanted to believe him so badly that his lie became history, taught in documentaries, repeated in articles, immortalized in a major Hollywood film. And now, years after his death, we're still trying to separate the man from the myth. What remains undeniable is this: Frank Lucas lived a life of crime, hurt countless people through drug trafficking, cooperated with law enforcement to save himself, and then spent his final decades selling the world a story that wasn't true. That's not the story of an American gangster. That's the story of an American con artist who conned us all. Join the Crime Chronicles community and dive into the darkest mysteries from around the world. Like, share, subscribe, and comment your thoughts. We love hearing your theories. Thank you for watching.